Hi everybody, welcome to Season 6, Episode 1 of Hard Truth Inside the Football Injury Podcast. Me, Phil Ideson, and Darragh MacAnthony, the chairman and owner of Peterborough United. We're back for our 6th season, Darragh. It's been some summer. How have you been doing?
It's crazy, isn't it? This is the 6th season.
Yeah.
My God. Wow.
Middle of COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm very disappointed not to make the Time Top 100 podcast list, that was released the other day.
Yeah, rigged.
Well,
it's been rigged.
Joe Rogan wasn't on the list, so it must have been a bunch of liberals that wrote the list up, do you know what I mean? So for him not to make it, But
you must be upsetting too many of us woke lefties.
I must be. Listen, you're no longer on the woke left, my friend. You like money too much now. So you're excluded from that list, But listen, great to be back. Another season. And this is what we do. And it's been busy. You've just been in Italy, eating your way halfway around Italy like I would have been. Yes. I'd done it in Dubai previous to that. So you've had a great holiday. We're back, 25th of July. Things start in 8 days' time or whatever else, kick off.
Yeah.
Really, really excited. Really, really good summer. Where do we go?
Seems to come around really quickly.
But you get to an end of the season, you're exhausted. It hasn't worked out the way you like it. You kind of like, get me to a holiday, finish off, and then within a couple of weeks of that, you're like, I want back in. When you have an appetite for the game, whether you're a player, whether you're an owner, whether you're in management, you're always like, I'm burnt out, I need a rest. And then after a couple of weeks, it's like, no, I want to go back to work.
Yeah.
So that's just the love of the game. I guess when you don't have that feeling, it's time to pack up. So
you've been watching much football over the summer?
No, to be fair, it's funny. My daughter was watching more of the Club World Cup. You were obviously at the Club World Cup. The first time I watched it was the final.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, unless there's a Euros on or a World Cup, I haven't really watched any. You know what I mean? So I've kind of like, bar doing my work during the day, football wise, and now obviously we've been doing a lot of preseason games. I think we've played 6 so far. So I've been at pretty much every single one of those games. Missed a lot of things, as regards on the TV, but Club World Cup looked like it was fun. Good for them, and well done, Chelsea.
Yeah, it was a funny one. Like you said, we went, I just always want the chance to take my kids to watch live football. And so we went to mostly Orlando-based games, which, who was there? There was Benfica against Auckland, Man City against Juve, then Man City against 𝗛𝗥𝗗, and then we went down to Miami for Real Madrid against Juve. And the tournament had so much potential, but as always, greed and money kind of gets in the way of it. I know, right? You have these games starting at 3:00 in the afternoon or noon in Orlando, when it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity, with two teams that really aren't very well supported, with prices that are still ridiculously high. They had so much opportunity to bring youngsters, bring school kids and groups and everything into.
They got a lot of things wrong, didn't they, with the marketing of it? That side of it was like, and I was laughing watching the press trying to have a dig every day, and another empty stadium, another empty this. The minute, the main guy, what's his name, Infantino, is it, or whatever? The minute, he suddenly shows up in the White House with Trump, I was waiting for the English journalists to have an overdose of, it's crap, and look at this, and this usual shit, you can ask me, I was on TalkSport, obviously, at some stage in May or the start of June, and, they were trying to push it, but they weren't getting much passion from me pushing it, because I'm just like, I don't think it's really needed, and it's not something, like I said, I'm tuning into, but I get listen, I'm not taking anything away from Chelsea. I was the guy a year ago on TalkSport that said Chelsea would have a really good year. Mm-hmm. And I thought they would, qualify for the Champions League. And as it happens, they've done that and won 2 cups. So you can't take that away from the Chelsea fans. And if I were a Liverpool fan, I probably would have watched it all.
Yeah.
Following my team and would have been delighted them winning. But, you're in the States, the humidity, they really need to handle it. But for the World Cup coming up next year, a lot of things need to change. Pricing, you know what I mean? Times of the games. I still swear a South American team's going to win the World Cup. I just can't see,
you don't realize how much it takes out of the players being, we get used to it, living in it all the time.
Do we?
So you don't, I think you adapt to it, don't you?
We're inside, Phil, all the time.
Yeah.
We live in Florida, You say we get used to it. We're not outside working. You're in an
Yeah.
office with air conditioning.
Yeah.
I'm in an office with air conditioning. These players work outside. Picture you now 4, 5, 6 hours a day outside at 96 degrees. It ain't happening. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's going to be tough next year in that World Cup. I'm looking forward to it. I will go to some of it, but it will be very, very difficult for the players, bar the South American players,
Yeah.
who I think will cope with it fine, and
Yeah.
a lot of the Spanish, Portuguese players.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think selfishly, I enjoyed the Club World Cup being there so I could go and take
Of course.
the kids to games that they wouldn't, to competitive, or should I say a step above a friendly
Yeah.
games that meant something. So they played the best players.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a place for it in the football calendar, really, when you look at it.
No. And I think we're all still surprised how Inter Miami got into it, having,
Yeah, well, I enjoyed seeing them getting beat because, like you say, it was, they could have finished bottom of MLS and they would have won the bottom of MLS pathway into it for being into Miami. So
it's crazy. So let's talk Peterborough and let's talk
yeah,
Bradford. And fans, that's what it's all about for us. Obviously Phil's a diehard Bradford fan. I'm very much a Peterborough fan, as well as an owner. That's what we do. For anyone new tuning in, here's the good news coming up this season. We're going to mix things up a little bit. It won't be just us talking. I will now have quite a few other owners on. I'm part of now a group of owners. The Barnsley owner got us all together about 3-4 weeks ago. I want to say the end of May. Started texting a few of us, and we ended up about 19 out of the 23 owners are now in this WhatsApp group, and it was really, really good, and it's funny. And I was in Dubai at the start of June, and you're throwing your opinions out and your points out, and other owners, and it's just purely owners.
Yeah.
It's not CEOs, it's owners. So you'll have people. I'd met a few people before, and you make comments and give them thoughts on what you think's wrong with the game, what's right with the game, and then people will throw back, and there's a bit of sarcasm, there's humor, there's banter. We've actually decided we're now having monthly calls. This is outside of the EFL stuff. This is owners on. We've had calls together. We've got ideas that we want to change within the game. When you look at the amount of money League One, League Two clubs lose, there's lots of things we're trying to change, and the only way we've decided we're going to make changes is as an ownership group.
Yeah.
So that's been really exciting. Meeting a lot of people and chuckling and all that kind of thing. So we've had like a couple of calls now. There's texts every day going on. I think it's 19 now, owners out of 23. So together, hopefully, we can, make a lot of changes, what I mean, and things that need to happen to our game. So I will report on that a lot more going forward on the pod, but I'm also going to get quite a few of those owners on.
Mm-hmm.
A few of them are like laughing when I said you're coming on as a guest, but they know that I'm going to get them on as a guest.
Yeah.
So, that's going to be exciting. So,
I think what's something is interesting about what you say, that we've talked about this on the pod before, but is not immediately obvious how such a small community football is. And even though there's on-field rivalry and there's rivalry in the stands and all that kind of stuff behind the scenes, yes, there's rivalry in terms of you all want to finish top of the table.
of course.
But there's a lot more of a kind of community, let's say, behind the scenes for football that transcends, which team that you're a part of, or which team you own, or which team you play for, or things like that.
We all agree, that we can't keep going like we're going.
Yeah.
We all agree that, our income isn't going up, our expenditure keeps going up. As the money, every time there's more money, it goes to just the players, or it goes on this, or it goes on that, and we get punished, and fans get punished because of the lack of facilities and the price of tickets, and there's loads of stuff we talked about, right down to marketing our product better in America. My idea to few them is let's all throw $5,000 in the pot and do it ourselves. Because we don't feel it's been done as well as it could be. There's loads of things. Another idea I had was that quite a few of us are big fans of how the NFL run things. Like Rob Coog's on it, who's the Reading owner, and Simon from Plymouth. Again, Bay States. A lot of people are based stateside, and we spoke about on this group text and in these video calls about we've got to market ourselves better in the States. There's so many things we could do better, and you're seeing the effect of obviously Wrexham and everything else stateside. And we're not saying any of us are getting anywhere near that kind of revenue from Wrexham. But
Wrexham have made the American public aware of the EFL.
They have,
so
and Birmingham. So it's our job now to monetize that with the World Cup next year.
Yeah.
Football's becoming more popular. The EFL's become more popular. So yeah, I'm looking forward to having a lot of these people on, and we'll have them on the pod. And we'll and you're right, there's rivalries there, and we all want to beat each other. But at the same time, we want a better product. We want, better financial regulations in place. We want some, intelligence in the things we do, because we're the only business in the world that operates constant 5, 6, 7 million losses every year. And that just can't carry on. And I think we're all pretty much on the same page for that. So there's a good, there's 23 clubs in League One, is there? Or is it 24? I can't remember. 24.
Yeah.
And, we got like pretty much 19 of us on there. So
yeah.
That's important, that we got so many owners. And before the Bradford fans ask, no, we don't have the Bradford owner in the group. So, but we are reaching out to everyone as much as we can, the ones we haven't got in there, to get them in the group. So we think it's really important.
All right, well, we need some peer pressure to get the 5 remaining ones in there.
We do. And at some point in the episode, I'll maybe name all the clubs that are in the group. But that's not a slight on the people not in the group, because some people, we a couple of them couldn't be reached. Some of them basically are just completely private and never want to be involved in any of that.
Well,
I get it.
There's different levels of involvement in club ownership, isn't there? Some are more silent investors who want others to take, who aren't involved in the day to day.
100%.
Others are fully, it's their full-time job. To be involved.
Absolutely. And look, it would be we're all on the same team as regards to ownership and stuff. So you rarely find me taking a pop at other owners, even when we have a fallout, even when we don't agree on something or whatever. I think, to go out and slate another owner or have a go or whatever, I just think it's the wrong thing. And you've seen that over the years in the pod. I'm always like, not on the fence, but respectful in a way, because I know how difficult it is to own a football club. So we are going to have plenty of people on. And it's been a pleasure, getting to know some of the owners I didn't know before. So it's been quite funny. So yeah, it's good. Looking forward to that.
Well, let's talk your transfer strategy this summer. So how did you kind of approach coming out of last season, and obviously the disappointment that you had last season in how the season went? You've had so many outgoings this year. Let's talk a little bit first about outgoings, and then we can talk about how you kind of rebuilt the squad. So, you've had some that we've known about for a while that you couldn't really do anything about, like 𝗛𝗎 going to QPR, Hector ended up, going to Watford, Ricky J. Jones going over to Germany, and, many others that left. Can you talk through some of, if you are surprised by any of the moves, if there's, just some general thoughts on kind of the ones that left.
So, we get to the end of the season, we knew a couple of things were true. One thing was we had St. George's Park at the start of July. So we had like 6-week periods. Me, Barry, the manager, went and took a rest, but we knew what we were up to. We had 6-7 weeks basically to do a couple of things. One, to move as many of the people on that we wanted to move on, and the people we knew who didn't want to be here, to get them out of our dressing room. We didn't want them reporting back. We didn't want them hanging around. We didn't want them around our people. We knew some of the problems and the issues last year were created by too many people didn't want to be there. Too many people had one eye on what was going to happen in their career this season coming up or the end of the season. And although they were great players and good players, we didn't get the best out of them in that way. And it certainly didn't help in a dressing room environment with young people and new people coming into it. So we had 6-7 weeks to make sure deals happened. We also had 6-7 weeks to do deals to bring players in and take a risk on those where I'm not saying we didn't have the money, but we were spending before we were selling. And what we didn't want to do is we didn't want deals coming out and people thinking we had X, X, and X when they start seeing some of the highlight figures. We also knew we had a £5 million hole like we do every year. So mission one is always fill as much of that hole as you can. And mission two is go sign some quality. We were all pretty much aligned on the positions we needed to fill. We knew we needed a couple of centre halves. We knew Sam needed to be one of them. We knew we needed a Hector replacement. We knew we needed a 𝗛𝗎 replacement. And we knew we needed, potentially a bit more talent out on the left side. And we knew we needed a goalkeeper, like 100%. So these were all the things we knew we needed, and we needed to knock it out of the park with the signings that we were going to make. So, and as that progressed, we started knocking them off one by one. I was very excited. I am very excited. I feel we've done some great business. I feel the goalie's one of the best we've had since way back in the Joe Lewis days. We haven't had a goalkeeper like that for a long time. It gives you so much confidence for your back four. We knew Dale Tong was leaving because he'd been approached to become assistant manager at Rotherham, and you couldn't stop him that opportunity. It's 5 minutes from his front doorstep, and it's a promotion. So we also knew that Rooster was available and out there, and he'd be pivotal as well and really good in our dressing room. He'd been with Stoke 21s, he'd been with the youngsters at Huddersfield, and with the first team. So he's bringing in, since he was last here, something different and something great with the youngsters. And Dale Thomas is an amazing coach, but Rooster knows us, and his personality is probably a little bit different. So we knew a lot of those things. We kind of nailed and landed a lot of things we wanted to do, and that's not me bragging and going, "Oh, it's this." Then we didn't miss out on a lot of our targets. We were quite methodical in the 2 or 3 per position we've named, and then going out and getting a lot of the first choices. Obviously at one stage over a 7-day period, things weren't looking great. We had Ricky going to Germany, we had Poku going to Scotland, a couple of other things were happening. I was basically like drowning myself in the pool out in Dubai. And then, by the will of God and the grace of God, things changed in the space of 24 hours. And what I mean by that is that suddenly Kwame didn't want to go to Scotland. And suddenly we started getting multiple bids from Manny Fernandez from Italy and from Scotland. Suddenly Stockport, I'd started dealing with the owner of Stockport, and their chief exec and a guy who runs the club called Simon. But their owner, Mark, was great to deal with when I was signing Sam. And suddenly they wanted Malik Mudasol. So a lot of things changed in a week. And also the Brandon deal was coming together. So it's funny in football. 1 minute it looks like you're kind of like, oh, it's never going to happen. And that's bad and that's bad. And then suddenly it all flips and it's like,
24 hours is a long time.
Yeah, I was having a drink with my wife at one point. The Sam deal wasn't happening. Ricky had gone to Germany and we were going to get stuff for millions. Kwame was going to go to Scotland. We were going to get stuff for 7 figures. And I sat there and I was like the frustrated guy, sat at the bar in Dubai where we always and inside my villa and losing my rag a little bit. It was just very, but and she was like, well, and I said, the one thing is the door's ajar and that fat bird ain't singing quite yet, so as long as the door's ajar, there's always a chance and you can change things and whatever.
I know you don't really do regrets, but were you looking back thinking, well, I wish last summer, the business last summer has cost me this amount of money because of what's transpired?
Phil, probably the worst emotion can screw you as a business person when you own a football club. And probably the worst decision I made in 20 years, and I made a few bad ones in football, but one of the worst, and this is true, is turning down the deals for Hector, Ricky, and Kwame last August, which was influenced by we'd lost Ronnie and Harrison and a couple of other players, Ephron, Mason Clark, and I didn't want to disappoint my fans and disappoint my managers. But on no word of a lie, we would have wiped out 65, 70% of the club debt with those 3. Now, we got money for Kwame. There'll be some form of compensation for Ricky. Nothing like we would have got if we'd stayed in England. Hector, we get nothing. We would have got a pretty penny from Watford last. So, if I showed you the deals, we're talking in the millions. And I rang up the manager when it was all going on and things weren't looking good regards Kwame, Ricky. I rang him up and I said, look, just so you know, I love you to bits. I can never, ever make a mistake like that again. Never. It's good for the team and bad for the club, if that makes sense. So at the time, it was good for the team not to lose those 3 players, but it was bad for the football club. And I have to make decisions for the football club. And it was really bad because it then put me under the pressure I was under this summer. And people will say, but you would have got relegated. And I would counter argue that and go, well, actually, I would have got rid of a lot of people in the dressing room who didn't want to be there. And I would have replaced them.
And you reinvested some of that money.
Of course I would have. I would have reinvested. So I don't agree. We made a mistake. I should have just come out last summer and said, you know what? These players have all got to go. We're stripping debt. We're stripping debt, not assets, debt. We're going to rebuild. It's going to take us a while and we might have a bit of an oaky season, but that's what we're going to do. So mistake made and lesson learned. Won't happen again. Really, really frustrating. But anyway, so we did good business between Malik and between Kwame going to QPR for something instead of nothing to Scotland, and between Manny Fernandez and whatever else. We pretty much got close to filling the hole. Earliest we've ever done that. A good year in advance. The whole starts July the 1st. So.
Was Malik and Manny both on your kind of radar to sell, or were those just deals that came across that were just good deals?
There was a group of players and they were quite close last year and together, and that would have been Malik, Manny, Kwame, Ricky. And a couple of the current players were in that group, whatever. But I would hear from some of the agents, the current players, that that group, when they would have calls and talks and it was always about where they're going and moving. And they're young men. I'm not going to criticize them for that. I get it. You're in football, but that doesn't help us. That doesn't help us in the present. When people are always just thinking down the line and the next move in the future and whatever, that doesn't help us as as a football club. So, I was happy to move them on. I was happy to do business for them. I think the time is right, and I think that rebuild that we started like 2 windows ago, and we're in the 3rd window of it now. I think I'm very happy with how that's going. And yeah, we did some great business. I think people, when they saw the deal we did for Manny, there were a lot of unfair comments. I get, Manny wasn't perfect for us last year, but I think he's been bought on potential, data, statistics, and I think he'll be a very good signing for Rangers. And I think it's very
he's
unfair.
been in demand. I mean, he was in demand in the window, wasn't he? And turned down the deal.
Yeah, Norwich.
So
Norwich. I thought he was the biggest idiot in the world turning them down. What do I know?
Yeah.
He's ended up with club being in the Champions League. So, I thought Norwich was the perfect move for him. But again, it just shows you that you don't always believe Twitterati and fans' opinions. And I've seen that with Hector, and I've seen it recently with signings we've made. You can't always, people are going on about in social media is not always relevant to the truth. And I'm not saying Manny was perfect. But look, he's got a good move and he's going to a good manager. And we're doing business with Rangers, and that's good for business. Some clubs we haven't done business with before, you're suddenly doing business with. And we had a chance to do business with 2 clubs in Italy, which I found fascinating when those things were happening along that. And he's 24, and I think he'll kick on and he'll do really well in Scotland. So I had no problem with any of the guys. I get it. People thought it was time to move on. Of course, some of those deals hurt me in a big way. I've already spoken about the Ricky thing. I don't really want to speak about him again. Hurt me massively, because I feel what I've done to make that player and keep him here under various managers didn't want them, and played a big part in that. And I just felt your club needs you sometimes and stood behind you. And people go, well, you can offer a new deal, offer incredible deals. They didn't want to stay. Same with Malik. He went to a club, we offered the same deal. At the end of the day, if someone doesn't want to be here, I read the other day, Pep Guardiola has this policy now at City. I'm not a fan of City. That if someone doesn't want to be here, come and ask to be away. And I said to my manager, we got to get our head around this. We're telling players last August, like, Hector, Kwame, Ricky, no, we're not accepting those bids. You're not going anywhere. They don't want to be here. They've asked to leave, and Joe Randall was part of that group as well. Wants to leave, so you've just got to move on. So this summer we've got obviously Harley, we've got Archie, and everyone's aware. We're talking contracts with them, and they don't sign contracts. They go on the transfer list. And I won't get emotional this time, as much as I think Archie's one of the best midfielders in our league. We have to think of the football club. And, the club moves on and the club lives on. And I hope he signs a new deal, and same with young Harley. So, particularly my young players from my academy, I think,
that's where you've invested so much.
In
nurturing them.
Yeah.
And the moment they get into the first team, to then cut and run.
Yes. And I think, they're so important to everything we do. Their identity, and they're young and they've got loads to learn and they're going to make mistakes. And I always and I did this with Ricky for years and Harrison, said to our fans, like, not lay off them, but just chill, chill, because these are one of your own. And I'm not saying they're perfect, and they are going to make mistakes. They're going to drive themselves mad, their parents mad, the fans mad. But we have to help them and support them. And I've always felt like that about our youngsters, And it's really funny. I met Harley's mum and dad at the MK Dons game the other day, and they're great people, like lovely people, genuine people, lovely people, feet on the ground people, and his dad was talking about him and how he keeps Harley's feet on the ground and everything else. It's like the way I parent, because I always say a lot of modern day parents don't parent the way necessarily I parent, or my parents parented me 35 years ago or whatever else. It's all a bit timid and soft and don't want to offend our child and don't want to be too tough on them and da-da-da-da-da. And this is the problem now. To me, youngsters are a little bit, dare I say, soft. And, so it was great talking to a fellow parent with a kid in a similar age group, because my son's 19, and hearing, what they're like with their kids, because I always think, me and my wife and how we parent, I wonder how other people parent and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And I don't ever, I'm not here to criticize people's parenting skills. We're all different. We're all fighting the same battle, doing the same job as best we can. So it's a bit like, again, being an owner. You
Making
know,
it up every day.
yeah, that's exactly it. You know, there's no perfect science. There's no divine way to do things. But, you know, so anyways, that was lovely to meet them. I even met, like, Mel's, the kit man's got an assistant and a bit of help this summer. And I met the kit man's dad. He came over
Yeah.
to say hello. I was trying to tell him, get done. You know what I mean? So it's always nice to meet people's parents.
Do you have any deadlines on Harley and Archie, or as you
No,
know, for you
no.
to know whether you're going to move forward or not?
Yeah, there's agreements between me and their representatives that, you know, we're going to get to a stage and, you know, it's yay or nay. And then obviously we know what happens next. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm hoping, you know what I mean, that they, you know, they sign, because they're both amazing lads. They're both amazing players. They're good people in the dressing room. They're good people we want in our football club. So I'm doing my best, but I'm always
Yeah.
working within perimeters, you know, and that's the way it is. So that was kind of like June, you know, and we knocked off a few early signings, and I can't remember. I think we did, was it Lisby first? We signed.
Yeah, and you got Declan
Yeah,
pretty early, didn't you?
yeah. My scouts have been at me to sign Declan for the last 2.5 windows, but, you know, it's too much money in the January, and I dealt with Declan's agent Francois. That was great. My French, you know, doing that deal. Declan's a lovely lad. You know, I'm sure our fans are probably, you know, we've seen the best of him pre-season, but he's going to be an amazing signing for us.
Mhm.
Kirill, the Lisby family are another great family. I think they've got their boys' feet on the floor. I think he's a proper gem. I've loved seeing him pre-season. I think
Yeah.
there's real talent there. I think every club he's gone to, he's upgraded and he's got better and better and better. So yeah, I'm excited about that one. We got the Sam deal done. It was so important because he's our captain. He's such a man's man, and, you know, you can tell why the players respect him and love him. You know, so I'm really, really excited about that one and getting that done. And then we obviously goalkeeper. That was one
Yeah.
I was jumping for joy. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, jumping for joy. And I haven't spent money on a goalie for a long time, but this was one I was happy to do, and it was a bit of a surprise for the gaffer. And I think, you know, so, and then we
I was
went.
surprised he was available. You know, we had him on loan
He wasn't
2 or 3 years
available.
ago.
He wasn't
Yeah.
available. We just, I basically went in and I said to Barry, get hold of the people in Notts County and ask the question, give me a
Yeah.
price. And they came back with a price, and I went, well, I can't do that, but I can do this. And then we suddenly got there.
Mhm.
You know, like I said, it's a substantial amount of money to pay for a goalkeeper. But I just think with everything going on in front of them, you know, you look at everything last year, you know, it was really funny. Rooster at St. George's and someone else had said, and Scarfy brought this statistic up, that, you know, and I knew that we were already the worst team for set pieces in the Football League last year. I knew we were one of the worst teams for pressing. And we come up with this mad statistic that if we had been, I forget what it was 10 goals less than set pieces conceded, we'd have
Yeah.
been like top 8 in League One.
Right.
Like, when you think about it, it's crazy. So I just said, like, to Rooster, and when he was doing, we went to St. George's and I'm watching him, and he's dealing with the set plays going, but, you know, we can improve this 30%. The difference it would make to us even last year, having a good goalkeeper, you know, not
Mhm.
conceding those silly goals from corners, set pieces, free
Yeah.
kicks.
Just being commanding of his box.
Yeah, correct. So just all those things, you know, we can clean it up. Our pressing, we'd have been a different team last year. Take the injuries out of it. Just look at that
Yeah.
data alone. You know, last in pressing, last in set plays and set pieces, both boxes. I mean, just a small percentage improvement, we'd have been top 10 team quite easily. So, and then obviously the other one I signed when I was in Dubai was Brandon. And, you
Yeah.
know, obviously I did reach out to you about a
Yeah.
character reference on him. You know, I kind of knew about the qualities, but I wanted to hear, you know, me and my guys obviously been looking at a Hector thing for quite a while. And it's such an extensive list. And, you know, the top 3, Brandon was in the top 3. But I just needed to know from you, like, you know, he didn't play a lot at the start. But what I
Mhm.
liked is he played 5 of the last 6 games. That tells me, you know, the manager trusts him. You know,
Yeah.
now tell me about the character. And I know that was tough for you because obviously you would have been maybe hoping potentially that maybe you guys would sign him or whatever else. But yeah, we feel very lucky to have acquired that player. Very
Yeah. I
lucky.
think
And
he'll do very well for you. I
yeah,
mean, you you can tell his, you know, at the beginning of his journey playing men's football, and you know, that's what took him a little while to get into the team, and also he was coming into a team on just an amazing run.
of
You know,
course.
that was the time when we were winning week after week
Yeah,
after week,
yeah,
on our run to the top of the table. So it was, you're not going to drop somebody
yeah.
for him.
No,
But when he came in, just very composed, box to box player, it makes everything look effortless.
yeah.
You know, the way he just glides over the field, just like I say, just makes it look really easy. and he just seemed like a really good kid, integrated really well. You know, at least as an outsider perspective, it seemed like, you know, he was a great kind of player in the team and pretty humble. And you know, all the things I think you'd like.
It was the start of trip in Dubai, and I sent the video we compiled, me and the analysts for the gaffer, and I just said, just have a look at this and ring me. And he's rang me and he go, what on earth? Like, you know, what's this? Then I'm like, I think this is our eight. I think this is the partner. And I said the mobility, you know, the fact that, and Hector would be the first to say his mobility was nothing like the previous season. Last season, he really struggled. I don't know, it was the injuries or whatever, but Brandon's mobility to go box to box. So we started then, once I got the okay from the gaffer, and he'd done his own character references and checks, I got Barry on to Birmingham. Then it started with them, the backwards and forwards. It's like 5-6 different beds. Then we knew other clubs were in. And then obviously we started talking to, the good news was his agent is James Donnelly's agent, which we had no idea. That was just pure coincidence. That just, we were like, and we started speaking to the agent and his dad, and they were out at a training camp in Spain. So that all started coming together. And obviously Craig was driving a hard bargain at Birmingham. You know, he's one of their assets from their academy. They want a lot of money. So I'm out for dinner with like some friends of ours, and in the end we got the deal done. The owner of Birmingham got involved, you know, and we were happy in the end. And it was a long-term 5-year deal. And then obviously I was worried because the player was at this camp. So we had to wait 5 days before the player was coming back. So I insisted they signed digital documents. It was subject to medical, so nobody could steal them. You know, that's how that one. I had a few sleepless nights waiting, because I thought, you know, I knew there were other clubs in our league that were in.
And the deal's not done until it's, as you have, you know, been the taking advantage of in the past.
Sorry, yes, absolutely. So, you know, so now and then when I finally got my eyes on him at St. George's and talking to the gaffer and the staff, so no, really happy with that. And look, we can keep talking about new signings, but a massive shout out to a lot of the younger players who had programs who came back looking ripped at St. George's. The first time we played Ipswich, and a lot of my players took the tops off, and I'm always quite jealous of teams when I see the physicality of their players.
Yeah.
That's the first time I'm walking around, basically. Don't get me wrong, you know, a lot of pretty players and whatever else. Not my type, unfortunately, but I'll tell you right now, their physicality and physique, phenomenal. I mean, Donna O'Brien Brady, I mean, the size of them. I mean, my God.
Different between kids and men, basically.
Phil, it was great. And it wasn't just them, it was some of our academy players who crossed the bridge, stepped over, started being involved. You know, Luke just looks an absolute first team player. You know, young Noah Friedman's done great preseason. You know, the ones that have come over from our academy have really helped, stepped up. You know, young Bolu was training with us at St. George's, and we had to be very careful with him. He's 16, he's rapid, can't do double sessions a day. So you got Stemps was there working on penalties, working on things with him. It was just great. It was a great camp. It was great togetherness. And you can bullshit and say that every year. There's a great togetherness, and we're all in this together. No, there's a really good atmosphere. There's a real atmosphere of we, not me. And I said this, there was too much me, not we last year. And this year it's we, not me. So, and speaking to the leadership group and whatever else. And look, like every football season, we're not going to be perfect. We're not going to be always at the races, you know, the way we want to be. There will be ups, there's downs. There'll be a lot more ups. But we're going to be different. And it's like, you know, you play preseason, you see some of the comments after some of the games, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, Phil.
I was gonna segue to that, and you know, say Baz, remind everyone that Baz always says, you know,
pay fucking no attention to preseason. He said it to me at MK Dolls the other night again. I mean, it's funny because obviously we've smashed a few teams on the lower league teams. You know, we've obviously, you know, we like helping the local area, you know, whatever else. But we also had Ipswich. We played them behind closed doors and want us to talk about the game during the game. We're okay to talk about it afterwards. They had pretty much a full strength squad. You know, it wasn't like
why wouldn't a club want to talk about a game while a game is happening?
I don't know. I don't judge other clubs for doing that. I guess that's what Premier League clubs, bigger clubs do. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we went. It was all, Phil wasn't allowed in. It was all kind of quite top secret. I obviously put a video up after saying it was a great game and won 1-0. You know, probably irritated everybody. But we played a game. We're letting our fans know. It's a Saturday. What are we doing? Twiddling our thumbs. So look, at the end of the day, we're appreciative to Mark Ashton and to Kieran and all the people there. You know, that it was a great workout. They looked after me and Barry really well. you know, and they're spending a lot of money on their training ground. It looks really good there, that the work they're doing, and great pitch we played on, and we beat them 1-0, so that was really good. But yeah, I mean, we played MK Dons the other night, and their pitch isn't quite ready. It's, you know,
Right.
it was like with some of the players, and you're thinking, oh my god, you know what I mean? It's I think probably the game was maybe a week too early for them. If I was being honest, you know, it's why we haven't played any games on our pitch
Yeah.
right until the season starts. But MK Dons will win League Two by 15, 20 points next year. Everyone knows they've spent the fresh few shillings.
Yeah.
They've
They
got,
bang. I mean, I know they've tried to buy it in the past, but it seems like they've gone even one step further in terms
yeah,
of
you know, they've got
how
like a
they've
4 or 5
invested.
time promotion winner in Paul Warren. It's not
Yeah.
just the money they've invested; it's the manager they brought in. They've got some very, very good players at that level. You can see that. So everyone's kind of like, this will be a really good game and a good test. And we played 2 11s, you know, in each half. They played a lot of 11 for about an hour, I think, and then changed a few, changed 4 or 5.
Mhm.
Um, and we won the game, but we weren't great. And the reaction afterwards just makes me laugh. Like, you know, and I have to be honest with you, our goalie really had nothing to do. You know, he
Yeah.
conceded the goal. We've hit the bar. You know, we've had chances. We won the game late on. We weren't good. We were like a 5 out of 10. But, you know, they played well, you know,
Yeah.
but I
And they were
honestly,
gonna be the top League Two team.
yeah. But, you know, there were lots of things my manager didn't like. But we played on the Tuesday. I know we played on Saturday, our first 90. And I think
Mhm.
that first 90 wiped out a lot of players. Because that's once you hit your first 90, that's like, I mean, you know, and I'm not making excuses for them. It wasn't good. There were lots of areas and lots of things you're like, oh, that's not good, and that's not good, and that's not good. But I like the mentality of losing a game with 10 minutes to go and scoring 2 late goals.
Yeah.
I'll take
In a
that all day
friendly
long.
when you could easily give up.
Correct. I'll take that all day long. And
Yeah.
whilst our players are way below their levels and probably irritated the manager and irritated a few of our fans, irritated me massively, I like the fact we won the game. But the great thing is, I think if you win every game, this thing about Barry in preseason, he's right. If you win every game preseason, it's a false done.
Mhm.
It's false done. The one season we stayed in the championship under my ownership, we had the worst preseason and pretty much lost every preseason game. That was the first time we ever stayed up in the championship. So it means shit. It's minutes,
Yeah.
it's fitness. All teams will say the same. And as long as you come through a touch wood without injuries and you're good to go. And
Yeah.
it's like everything else, you know, you go into your season basically, and a lot of managers will be the same. They don't know probably even till the end of August what the strongest 11 is, even when
Mhm.
they've already started the season.
Yeah.
And we play Colchester tonight. And I think between me and you, and it'll be out afterwards, I think a lot of the people in the team tonight against Colchester will be starting the season.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
you know, so I'm looking forward to that game. You know,
And
Colchester have always been good to us.
and have you got Grimsby tomorrow as well?
Yeah, we've got 11 tonight at Colchester. And then
Yeah.
the 11 who don't play tonight will play at Grimsby tomorrow, which is still a
Yeah.
very strong team. I know both
Yeah.
teams.
Yeah.
So yeah, and obviously we you know, I forgot to mention David. Delighted to get David from Walsall on board.
Mhm.
You know,
That was just
obviously,
a couple of days ago, wasn't it?
yeah, he was basically 1 or 2 targets we were trying to get in there at centre half all summer. I know some of the Walsall fans were quite harsh on David. Me, the manager, and my data, my analysts, what we've seen, Rooster, we're actually very happy with that deal. We're very happy to sign a player of his age. We're very happy to see a player that we can improve. We're never going to sign a finished article at Peterborough United.
It it's very funny how whenever a selling team sells someone, you have everyone telling you about how bad they are.
Yeah.
Um,
We had it with Hector.
it happens without fail. You know, anybody that goes anywhere, and then everybody who has never heard of a player before is suddenly an expert on them,
100%.
and believes they know everything of what to expect from them when they come in.
Yeah, 100%. And I've had it a million times. I've had it with Hector. Oh, I could name 5 players like that have ended up in absolutely. I remember Ivan Tony coming in, and
Yeah.
we had so many fans from the clubs he'd been on loan at laughing at us. The Shrewsbury fans, a few Scunny fans. Do you know what I mean? Ivan
Mhm.
Tony, oh, what a load of rubbish. I mean, I never pay any attention to it. My eyes don't tell lies. David's not the finished article. But we also spoke extensively to Rooster, who had David at Stoke when he was a younger
Yeah.
player in the 21s. And he knows the improvement we can make. And, you know, we did a good deal with Wolves, so we did a fair deal, we feel, for a player of his young age and quality. And he played 50 times last year. And we feel he was one of Walsall's 3 best players last year. And there's a lot of
Mhm.
upside with what we can work on. We also took a big view when we watched him play for the Republic of Ireland under 21s versus how he played with Walsall and the styles. And that was a fascinating comparison when you watch both.
Yeah. So the big announcement of preseason, I guess, is going to be July 31st and your new badge. So
Oh shit, I forgot about that. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
already
You're
all
right.
ready to go on that one.
You're right. You've seen it, right?
I haven't. No.
Oh, you've not seen it? Oh,
You
crikey.
should send. Yeah, you should
Yeah.
send me it, and I'll keep it under wraps.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't actually have a copy of it here, but I do need to get one. So
Yeah.
yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, the 31st. Crikey, I'm so focused on game tonight. Game tomorrow.
Yeah.
I got to go away in business for 3 days, and then obviously back in for Cardiff next weekend. So that's kind of just been my focus. I forgot all about the launch of the
So
new brand. So no,
that'll
look,
be the day. That'll be
listen.
the day not to look at your Twitter account.
No, I don't look. The Twitter ratty doesn't define who you are. It doesn't define good signings, bad signings. It certainly doesn't define the mechanisms of how a club wants to evolve.
Yeah.
It's a small sample size of opinion. You know that, I know that. The Twitterati are a tough crowd to please. So I'll always say to owners and everyone else, don't pay attention to the majority of what's on Twitter. That's just life. You'd probably feel the same way where you're probably on Blue Sky or whatever it's called all the time. That liberal
No,
place.
I resisted that.
So I'm joking. So yeah, no, the brand launch is so exciting. I can't wait for it. So
Yeah.
I'll make it short and sweet because obviously there's a lot of non-posh fans listening to our podcast. I think it's something, after being presented to me, the various meetings I've seen, the styles, what we ended up with, I'm very excited about it. I think it's perfect for the brands going into the future. I think you see the biggest clubs in the world doing this, and and why they do it, and everything behind the reasoning behind it. I think it's the right thing for our football club. And whilst not everyone will be delighted or happy with it, I think it'll settle down where majority will be happy, and the minority who don't like it will settle down and fall in love with it. And as
Yeah.
branding, as you see new kits, whatever next year or whatever with the brand, you'll understand. You see digital stuff, you'll understand. So no, get ready for that 31st. I'm excited. Yesterday we released the white strip. That's gone down really well. We're selling strips and numbers we've never done before. So lots to be excited about. We crossed our mega store, as I like to call it, and we'd envisaged, taking X amount of time to hit 1 million in shop sales. We did it 2 months ahead of time.
Yeah.
So that's flying. Like, the commercial team are killing it. And I'm hoping now the football teams can return to killing it too.
Yeah. You think the investment in the store helped, helps you sell more stuff because it's just, you've got a
Absolutely.
better environment, it's better
Absolutely.
laid out. People are picking up other things they might not have thought about when they came into the store to buy the shirt.
I think people can basically spend as much time as they want in there. I think it's a beautiful place. I think it's comfortable. It's not a squeeze like it used to be. Basically, like you're trying to walk all over people to get to a till.
That's like what ours is.
Yeah, ours is this beautiful big space, beautiful counters with people who are there to help. We've got staff who are just fantastic at upselling. They know they're trained. Alex is trained really well. We're now going to also, down the line, we spoke about this in some of the commercial meetings recently, get a digital setup in there where you can even potentially buy tickets at the counter when you're paying for your shirts and stuff, like a cinema, pick seats on the big screen, touch screen, and people who haven't or getting friend seats and whatever have basically use the shop as also an extra area to upgrade people and sell them season tickets and 10 match passes and all that kind of stuff. So we're really happy about that. Now we've got the bar. I think we just got permission to do the coffee bar. The bar we were doing for or was it a wine bar? I can't remember, for the supporters. And, it's going to be at the front of the stadium. It's a small thing that we're doing. Sponsors helping us. We're really excited about that. So yeah, more improvement coming.
Well, we've been busy
on to the
this preseason.
Give it to me.
As well.
Come on.
And
you're winning the league.
I laugh. I know, I laugh because we just talked about don't believe anything that happens in preseason, and we're sat here with a relatively good preseason so far.
Right.
I think that I'm really happy with our business so far.
Gotcha.
We've had departures that we would have expected to have left. Perhaps the only surprise for us was Richie Smallwood leaving.
What's a shocker?
Yeah, he was made. He was never made an offer. It was suggested to him that an offer would be forthcoming, from what I understand.
Right.
And Graham Alexander started to have some second thoughts.
Wow.
And when he's talked about his kind of decision making process for that, he kind of taps back into what his experience as a player, and has he started to not get the game time that he wanted to,
okay,
and the effect that had on him, and I think he believes that Smallwood wouldn't have been as big a piece of the team next season as he was this season. And while Smallwood said that he would be okay with that, I'm not sure that Alexander believed that that would be. And perhaps the better thing for him as a player was to go and find somewhere where he would still get, first team football every week and still be, the linchpin. So he's gone to Tranmere, which I was surprised. I mean, I'm happy for, I know some of the folks at Tranmere, and I'm happy because I think it's a really good match for them.
Great signing.
And he's still got so much to give.
Yeah.
I think that he's certainly not somebody on his way out or on his way down. He's looked after himself for his entire career. He's the kind of player that's not really relied on pace or anything like that. He's more of the quarterback. And I was disappointed he left when we heard that he was leaving. But I can't fault any of the recruitment, I don't think.
Run me through the recruitment. Run me through the signings.
So we have signed at the back Curtis Tilt from Salford. I wasn't sure about that, but watched him the other day against Middlesbrough, and he certainly looks like he's strong at the back, a bit of a bruiser, stand up for his teammates. Joe Wright from Kilmarnock, who looks like a good signing for the back too. We brought Ibu Torre from Stockport as on the wing back. Matthew Pennington from Blackpool as a centre back as well. Who else at the back? That's pretty much. Josh Newville from Wimbledon, who looks a terrific signing already from what I've seen from him. He looks the kind of player that I wouldn't be surprised if he's moving on and up. 12 months, 18 months into his contract. So we look pretty strong at the back. Still some gaps in midfield. I think we brought in Max Power to replace Richie Smallwood.
A lot of experience.
I'm sorry?
A lot of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been promoted out. I think that was, the early signings that we made were all about players who have been there, who have had experience in League One and had experience getting promoted out of League One, played, in the Championship as well. We just signed yesterday Jensen Metcalf from Everton, who was at Chesterfield last year on loan. And that was, I think, a 3-year. So that was a permanent deal.
Nice.
So, I know Chesterfield fans seem to be, singing his praises. I don't know too much about him, to be honest.
Yep. Solid signing.
Interested to see how that one goes. And then up front, Stephen Humphreys from Barnsley and Will Swan from Crawley.
Yeah.
At the moment.
All players who played League One. So, I see, you're trying to acclimatise quickly. Really, really sensible business. I can see why everyone's excited, you know what I mean? So club your size, and whatever else. It's there's no doubt that, look, fair play to the ownership group, fair play to David Sharp, Ryan, everyone involved. So, you're happy with what you've said. How many games have we played pre-season so far?
We've had, 1, 2, 3, 4 so far. So FC United, Chorley, a random team in Austria, and then we had Middlesbrough a couple of days ago. We beat them 2-0, and that was a good performance. We go to Oldham tomorrow.
So you went to Austria for pre-season? Is that where your camp was?
No, so we did. Yeah, we do. Graham Alexander does this camp every year, which is kind of the death camp. He takes them and does 3-4 training sessions a day. Just works them really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
It's just what he does. I think that he does it for as much for bringing the team together, bringing new players together into the environment, and from what he's talked about it is something that he likes to reminisce about during a season. Like when players have tough moments, kind of reminds them of how tough it was when they went on pre-season and the things that they got over to show them that they have the ability to overcome difficult hurdles, and it's just a big part of how he prepares his teams in the summer.
That's good. So you're feeling like, watching what you've watched, the Middlesbrough game as well in particular. Yeah. You're feeling very confident about what's to come.
Yeah, I think the proof is when you start playing competitive League One football, isn't it? And it can all unravel at that point. But I feel like they're in a good place. I went to Chorley. That was just about getting minutes in the legs.
Of course.
Middlesbrough, you could see that there was. I was really encouraged by the pressing, and we scored last kick of the game, 94th minute, but we're still pressing. You know, we made that goal from pressing.
Very good.
And so there's definitely, like you were saying about, you know, what you saw from your team at MK Dons about kind of going to the end. You see that in at least what we've seen from them so far in preseason. So
Good.
I'm happy with the quality. It feels like we're not just showing to, you know, we're not just turning up and trying to compete. You know, we're trying to do more than that this season. I think there's money that's been invested. You can. The biggest cue to me about the money being invested is we redid all the seats in the Kop.
Very good.
So the Kop has been, you know, the seats in there are 25 years old at this point.
Yeah.
Look awful. Ryan's been doing the best he can to, you know, beg and steal and, you know, do all he can to get one block at a time done around the stadium with the seats, because, as you know, it's not a cheap undertaking to replace all these things, especially not, you know, then in the Kop, the 7,400 seats to be replaced. And so he's had no revenue really to be able to do any of that. Well, this season the whole thing has just been done. And so it shows to me that the owner is investing, you know, in the club to invest in projects like that previously Ryan had no chance of getting any money for.
No, that's fantastic. Good. So where do you, obviously I've seen, you know, a lot of people are talking, obviously. I get it. We're like the forgotten club at the moment, and you know, written off kind of thing and all of that. And I'm happy with that. No problem at all. You know what I mean? But I see like you, a lot of fans, a lot of people are, you fancy you guys to be top 6, top 8.
It feels a stretch, but it only feels a stretch because, you know, probably because of what's come before rather than what's in front of us. It feels a bit of a step up, because talking about playoffs in League One after being, you know, scraping around the bottom half of League Two for most of the last 6 or 7 years. But the quality's there that I think we're giving it a go. I think that's the aim of the club, is to get in the playoffs.
Nice to be optimistic, right?
Right. And so whether that's doable or not, who knows? But I sit here as confident as you can be, which is never overly confident, that, you know, we're not just going to come and we're scrapping for 5th bottom. You know, I think we're, you know, we've got higher goals than that.
Good, and you should for a club your size. So that's, you know, look, when you see clubs recently in the Stockports of the world as well, who've, like, you know, and yes, Stockport spend good money and they've got a great owner, but again, look at them last year, you know, top 6. Look at them when they were competing against Wrexham in League Two. You know, so it's almost forgotten what Stockport did, and they don't get enough credit for what they did. You know, and it's a really, really well-run football club. So, and they don't get the crowds of Bradford. And you know, look at the business they've done. So, I can't pick anyone in League Two or League One. I mean, obviously Huddersfield are out there in an island. You know, with some of the signings they're making, you know, they're investing. We've spent a lot of money. But, you know, people haven't really, this silly little boys on Twitter making comments that we asset strip, we don't do anything. But I think we're the 3rd biggest spenders over the last 3 seasons combined, you know, in League One. Because yes, we sell players, but we also spend millions in the other way. And we've always done that. We've done it. Spent a lot of money again this summer, and we're not done yet. So you know, that's quite normal. So I couldn't pick. People always say predict this, predict that, whatever else. I couldn't pick.
It's pretty open. It's more open than it's been for a number of years.
I think so. You know, obviously, you know, the Plymouths have come down. Luton are going to be strong. You know, Huddersfield are going to be strong. You know, Wickham will be strong. We've spent a few quid. Stockport will be strong again. You'd think Leighton Orient are rebuilding, should be strong, good manager. Bolton.
There's a lot of good clubs in there.
Yeah, Barnsley, Bolton, the usual suspects. Peterborough, you know, have always been thereabouts. I couldn't really, you know, at Doncaster won't be mugs. So I don't know. You know, it's going to be interesting. But I will say to everyone, you know, promotion ain't won in the first month of the season. That's for sure.
No. Do you, when you're kind of setting out your budget for a year, do you look at the quality around of other clubs and say, you know, this year there's so much money in all these places, I'm not sure if it makes sense to have a go, versus this year it's a bit of a level playing field and a bit of extra money I think is going to make a difference?
No, we every time we compete in League One want to win promotion. And I think I've learned from that, from when we won promotion in the league with Leeds and Leicester in it, and Brighton in it, and Southampton in it, and Sheffield Wednesday in it, Sheffield United in it. When you come in promotions in years like that, So otherwise, you wouldn't have bothered trying. You wouldn't have
Yeah.
spent if you thought, well, Leeds
Yeah.
is in our league. Oh my God, Leicester in our league. Wow. You know, we wouldn't have. So
I'll save my powder until next year.
no, our mindset is every year. You know, I know we had a crap season last year and there were so many mitigating circumstances, but every year we fancy ourselves to have a go. We fancy ourselves to be at the top end. And it's no different this year. And I know we've lost the confidence to the Twitterati and some of the local media and the fan base because we've had that stinker of a season last year, even though I argued on, you know, I went on a podcast that some of the posh fans do. They keep trying to get me to wear badges and advertising and stuff for them. And they're all great fellas. And I just said to them, look, you know, there were four teams who were successful out of League One last year, name them. And they were naming everyone but us. And I was like, well, you know, here's the three teams that won promotion and here's the four team that won a cup and a trophy. They're your four most successful teams out of League One last year. So we forget that very quickly. But in 5 years' time, when someone asks a trivia question, you know, who were the four, you know, teams that competitively won something that year? Nobody in the playoffs that lost will be mentioned, you know, and nobody will mention where we finished in the league. So yeah, I'm always optimistic. I'm excited. I'm genuinely excited, and you know, I think there's a lot of good things to come. And I've said, you know, sleep on us, no problem. And look, we've a cracking start. You know, you Cardiff, Luton, the big juicy games. People are, oh my God, you're away from them. I don't care who we play. You have to play them all. You want to win promotion in this league. When's the hard truth derby? When's the first one?
I think it's the 20th. Is it 23rd or the 28th of August? One of the two.
Are you there?
Probably. You know, it's typical that we go back home, or we go back to the US on something like the 6th or the 7th of August. So I probably preferred it to a little bit further out so that I didn't get in trouble with the family. But more than likely, you know, I'll find some work reason why I need to be here. And
you can tell the wife doesn't listen to your podcast.
He does mostly.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. Yeah, I've got to go back to the States on the 15th to move Darcy into Alabama.
Yeah.
So, and then I come back to the UK. I'm doing the Sky thing, and then obviously to see a couple of the games. You know what I mean? So I think I will be there for the Bradford game.
Yeah.
So if you are there, it will be good. We can do an episode.
I plan on haven't booked my flights yet, but I don't want to miss it.
Yeah, hopefully a cracker.
Yeah. And you know, it's so many of the staff at Peterborough that I've talked to about, you know, the time when City finally come down here. So yeah, I definitely want to make it.
Oh, it'll be a good game. You'll bring a good crowd. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It'll be a decent game. You know, well, listen, forget Bradford and Peterborough for now. What else in football should we cover? You know, before the episode's over. This is kind of the first episode.
So much going on that I think a lot of it I'm sure we'll save for,
of course.
You know, when we're not talking about all of our pre-seasons. A couple of things I think we have to just reference, and of course, 𝗛𝗥𝗗 𝗧𝗥𝗏 and his brother Andre's, you know, tragic deaths a couple of weeks ago, and
awful. God bless
how awful that is.
God bless them. Yeah, awful. I mean, you know, terrible. I was at St. George's Park when that came up, and it was on the TV in the background. We were having a meeting in one of the lounges, you know, and yeah, forget about them as footballers, just as young men at that age to be
with
taken,
families.
Yeah, with families and just want to get married. And look, you know, God bless them and their families. Look, a lot of good people have died recently. Some a lot older, some younger. You know, you've seen that. You've seen people in football lose their lives. Usually they're a lot older, not at that age. Yeah, no, listen, we send our best to them and their families. That's awful, and you don't want to see that. And too many people have died recently. Terrible.
And I think it was this week, or maybe it was last week, that the bill to establish the regulator finally passed into law. What are your kind of feelings on that now it's been passed?
Let's see what's next. That's what I've always been like. You know, there's always a lot of talk about things, you know, bigger deals from the Premier League, more money, all of that stuff we've been promised. It hasn't materialized. One of the promises with a regulator, and things will be more fair. And, you know, I just hope the regulator is good for the game, good for teams, good for fans. And, you know, you don't have situations where right now you've got one with Morecambe. You don't have those things happening again, you know, with a regulator. But again, a regulator, as an owner, they have to also understand you don't want a regulator putting their 2 pence worth in where they're not needed. And I'm not saying they're not needed. They will be needed. And I've always said this, there needs to be more help. We don't have another Reading. you don't have another, you go back to the Bury, all those clubs that have got into trouble because it's bad for the fans. It's not good for the fans and stakeholders. And, so I'm going to reserve my judgment to commentate and to go into detail on what I think the regulator can do or should do. The proof's in the pudding. So let's see if they hit the floor running. Every time they come out with stuff, we can discuss it on the show, and I'll tell the truth. I'll tell the hard truth. If I don't like it, I'll call it out. So I might not be popular with the regulator.
I feel that the best regulator is a silent regulator, in that it's the threat of the regulator which drives the components that are being regulated, constituents that are being regulated to make decisions that don't end up having scrutiny by the regulator. It's just the threat of it being there is more than actually telling the clubs that they have to do this, that, and the other.
I just want to make sure they're here to help. I want to make sure they're not here to hamstring us. I'm to make life difficult for good owners. I think we need a regulator to make sure we don't have bad owners and that we don't get clubs in trouble. But I've fallen afoul of the FA, the EFL over the years for things I would go, well, I was right and they were wrong. So again, sometimes you can get too busy. And I always say the job of the EFL is to make our life easier as football clubs, not to make life more difficult. Same for the FA, same for all those things. So I do pray the regulator, makes all our lives easier. Because like I said, like the FA and the EFL to be better at that. That's not me having a dig. That's just factual. We all were meant to be this big football family, and we know we have our issues with the Premier League and academy stuff and all of that. Look, I'll keep an open mind. I was always a little bit dubious on regulator and what difference they would make. I'll keep an open mind, and I will obviously report in my feedback and thoughts. But just hear this, that the owners in League One and the group I'm part of and everything else are very much aligned in the majority that we want to make a difference, and we want to make sure our clubs continue to operate, be healthy, which will benefit our fans long term. And, the rinsing from agents and players stops, and the rinsing from above.
Is there anything you can really do about wage inflation? Because ultimately, whatever the revenue, as the revenue gets higher, it just all goes to wages. And it's almost like collectively you have to make a decision to not pay
you missed the point. You missed the point. Inflation and whatever else, we get £1 million or whatever in TV money, but wages, and that hasn't really changed over the course of 10 years. Now do the percentages on wages.
Right.
Now do the percentage for players 10 years ago on £1,000 a week, and now most of them on 4s and 5s.
Yeah.
But the income hasn't gone up any differently. So you start looking at that, something has to break, something snaps. Agents get too much. It's simple things we can all agree on. The loan system, where we're abused with the loan system. Those things we can get aligned with. The 60% rule, where we spend 60% of what we bring in. We could align that with League Two. We could go lower. These are ways you can bring all that in line. Obviously, you've got the PFA in the background, who are always going to be with these are the rules. And this is the way. And they're right. We have to stay within the bounds of law, and we and do things the right way. And we made a mistake on that in the past, and we can't make those mistakes again. And we have to involve them, and we have to make them see sense, because the PFA will agree, I'm sure, that every summer there's thousands of people, their members, unemployed. And they're unemployed because a lot of football teams can't afford to carry squads of bigger than 20, 21 players, plus a few youth team players. So that doesn't help the PFA, and whilst they're against wage caps, because we have it in the States as a wage cap, and the PFA are against that. And I'm getting into things here, and maybe I'll do it more down the line. But I'm the type of person, I think everyone just needs to sit together and go, look, common sense has to prevail. This isn't a group of owners in any league trying to make a profit and trying to make money or whatever else. We know, football is a loss-making exercise until you maybe sell your club. And, we all basically want to be on the side of common sense. And common sense isn't losing £6 million every year, Phil. And the PFA have to sit down and agree with that.
Well, and I think that's the key is, when you're in negotiations, I've done lots of negotiations in my procurement life, and, you can enter a negotiation looking at what's a win-win, or you can enter a negotiation as it being a zero-sum game. There's a winner and a loser. And it feels at the moment that most negotiations are zero sum. It's one side trying to maximize what they can get out from the other side, and the players
never going to work.
Hold the power, and that will ultimately collapse when you can't pay those. When the system can't support the payment of those wages anymore. And it's
Yeah.
okay. So do the players recognize that this isn't sustainable, even though they may be making out now, before it gets to the point where it kind of collapses on itself?
Absolutely, and that's what we always talk about. And we're very fortunate to be the club that doesn't lose 6 million a year. Yes, we carry a lot of debt, but
Yeah.
we produce a lot of revenue from player sales. So we tend to wash our face every year and be
Yeah.
quite successful on the pitch whilst doing that. But we don't do silly things. I see some clubs, the money they're paying players. I'm not against players earning money. I'm
Yeah.
not. I've made more millionaires at our club than the National Lottery has. Over the last 20 years. From young players and whatever else. But I think there's a time, there's a way, and I think at times greed overtakes things. And I just think if I was sat with a PFA or sat with everyone, I would just say, hey, the only thing I'm going to talk about today, and I want everyone to agree on, is common sense policies, common sense, future. And we talk about football tickets are too expensive. We talk about facilities being shit. It's because a lot of clubs don't have the money to improve the facilities because it all goes one side, and a lot of clubs can't afford to do 20 is plenty or 30 is the right price or whatever. They just can't afford to do it. So
Yeah, and
again,
the expectation of the fans is every penny that comes into the club
yeah,
goes on the pitch.
yeah, it's just getting tougher. And with inflation and everything that's happened economically the last few years, is running football clubs away from the football side of stuff's just gone through the roof, from your electricity to everything else. So, I just think we've talked about it for a long time. You will have more Morecambs happen, and they've got issues going on at the moment. I hope for their fans' sake that's all resolved. And I'm not a financial guru or savant or an expert. I can only talk about my experience. I can talk about the things we need to improve on. But I'm just glad to hear it's not just me that thinks that way. And there's a lot more owners in League One and League Two, who haven't even got into the champ yet, that agree and think that it's just crazy and it's getting silly. So anyway, that's maybe a bigger conversation. And maybe we need to have like a Kieran Maguire on the show down the line. He's great at all that, going through accounts and likes calling out my club a few times and all that shit. No problem with that. But he's good at what he does. And, and get him into
Holding owners accountable.
Yeah. But he can be smarmy doing that, and a bit smart at times. I have to give him a smack, But I respect him, and I think he's the type of guy that he can see numbers differently from all of us.
Yeah.
And as you engage and go forward and whatever else, you need to talk to more people like that, at the table and go, these are our ideas, and we're thinking NFL system, we're thinking that. Look at the finances behind it. Look at the longevity, the long term. The one thing we love about the NFL is they include the players in everything, whereby the more successful and more money they bring in, the wage cap gets bigger every year and there's more money for the players. So that engages the players to do more media, more marketing, a lot more work on behalf of the overall product. So everyone's happy in this ecosystem. So anyway, I think, down the line, we got to have Kieran on the show, definitely, and other people as well.
So I'm going to finish with one question, because I know that we're running a little bit long, and we'll come back in our next episode to talk more about kind of previews and what's happened in each league as we kind of gear up for the new season. But it's a question from 𝗛𝗥𝗗 on X, and he's a City fan, a Bradford City fan, and he said, kind of, what's your thoughts on half the Bradford League Two promotion winning team looking like they won't be starters this season? And when you get promoted, is that just an occupational hazard? You put everything in, you get promoted, the next season you're a reserve in a higher division. How do players deal with that? How do you deal with that as a club owner?
Well, they still get paid, so the players are fine. But I love it. It's ruthless, and my biggest criticism would be when we got to the champ a few times over the last 20 years, we haven't been ruthless enough. We've taken far too many players with us who weren't good enough for the champ. That'll never happen again. Like you have to. I think you have to look at, and what your club's obviously done is you have to look at each league in isolation. Whereas when we got promoted, it was like, this is great, the momentum. We can do what we did in League Two and League One and back to back and do really well. And you have to look at each league in isolation. I think what your club's done is, which actually is rare, because a lot of clubs have gone League Two, League One and bounced and done really well. Majority of the same players and same 11 and whatever. But I think you've just looked at it and gone, actually, we need to be better. We need, a stronger 11. The 11 best players in League Two we had aren't necessarily going to get us to where we want in League One. I can't criticize that. They feel that's the best policy. We will do that. Whether we've done it in the past, we do it in the future, we would do that. So I think as a football fan, put your seatbelt on, sit back, and either enjoy the ride or try and get off the ride as quick as you can.
And as a player, does that disincent the players to get promoted?
No, because I think players have to realise that Some are good enough for a level, and they're not good
Yeah.
enough for the next level. And they might be a first-team player in League Two, and they might be a squad player in League One, and they're definitely not going to be a player in the Champ. And I think players, as they get older, they're not daft, they're not stupid, they see it. And as long as their contract's taken care of, as long as they can go from that club to another club, you look at Smallwood as an example. So he didn't have any options in League One, including your club. So what he's done is he's pivoted to Tranmere. Tranmere are probably giving him a little bit more money, maybe a couple of years, and then they've got a chance of maybe building a promotion side with a guy who's won promotion multiple times. Maybe Richie knew League One was maybe he'd be a sub, he'd be a squad player, he'd be the main man still for Tranmere. So that right there is your example. He's done what's right for his
Walker
career.
was another one for us that did the same, who was with you, you know, in the past.
Yeah,
He was, and he went to Grimsby.
Yeah, 100%, and probably the right move from players and their agents have to have those honest conversations. And we've had it with players before. Look, guys, you're going on the list. You're not good enough. You know, you might even get in the squad. You might even get in the bench. And by the way, the bench in the Championship, I think it's like 10 players. So if you're not getting on that bench, you know, it's time to go. So if you want to sit in the reserves and earn your wage and just take your wage and don't want to leave, that's on you. But you know, players, they're big enough and bold enough to deal with it. And I think it's brilliant from clubs that are ruthless enough to recognise that maybe they're not quite good enough to do what they did in League Two, League One up. So I think it should be commended. So you know, so that's it. So look, let me finish by saying, you know, best of luck to everybody. I know we'll do a pre-season thing or whatever else, but obviously the end of pre-season, best of luck to all teams. Touch wood, no one has injuries or loses players. You know, I think it's important, you know, going forward that this season we get a lot more engagement from our fans. We have maybe some fans on as guests. We're going to have some other guests from ownership groups, not just in League One, it'll be League Two and the Champ. So yeah, buckle up and look forward to season 6 for your week. Fucking come.
All right. Well, if you have a question for Darragh, then you can send them in via email, contact@hardtruthfootball.com. You can also follow us, send us questions on X, on Instagram, or at TikTok. All those is @HardTruthPod. Also, we put every episode on YouTube, and this season we're going to be publishing those at the same time that we publish the audio. We've had a delay in past seasons, but you can always go to YouTube and watch on video rather than the podcast. All right. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, for joining us. Start of a new season. We're all full of hope and anticipation and expectation. And we'll be back again, I'm sure, next week.
Definitely.
Until then, have a great weekend.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Thanks. Take care, everyone. Bye.